Welcome to GameRomp's Easy Mode, an easygoing casual conversation about games and how we play them. We're your hosts, Deanna
and David.
So, do you want to go first this time, or shall I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, this past week, I played A Mortician's Tale. It's a very small indie game. It took me about an hour. 58 minutes, close enough.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to go over some quick info since it's an indie game. So I figured with indie games we should kind of...
Yeah, that's fine. I've never heard of it.
So the release date was October 18th, 2017. And I've had this installed on my computer since last year. It's been on my computer for way too long. It was developed and published by Laundry Bear Games, which is an indie dev studio with about 7 people. They only have 2 full games from them alone, but they have tons of games that they've helped work on, including Ooblets, which I freaking love, Celeste, which a lot of people freaking love, Parkitect, which eventually I would like to play that.
Yeah, me too, definitely.
And many others, but I figured I'd bring out those 3. Okay, so the general rundown. Mortician's Tale is about you, a young lady by the name of Charlie, or her nickname's Charlie, who is hired to work at a mom-and-pop funeral home. You get the bodies, you clean and prep depending on what the families request. Work is infrequent and funeral home gets bought out by corporation, company runs it badly, people leave, Charlie goes her own way. So that's just a quick rundown notes. So I really did enjoy this game even though it was incredibly short.
So you actually did finish it?
Yes. I went through the whole story. If you don't like reading, this game is not going to be for you.
Oh boy.
But I do enjoy reading. And
so it's very story heavy.
In the sense that that's what most of the gameplay is, yes.
Oh, interesting.
But it's not very...
Well, it is called The Mortician's Story, right?
Or Mortician's Tale, yeah.
I guess that makes sense.
But I wouldn't call it necessarily story heavy in lore or stuff. You read a lot but the story is still kind of vague almost.
Yeah.
You have a very vague introduction to each family that is burying someone. They don't get super deep into it. You come across the story through little dialogue options, but you're kind of also tasked, if you will, with interpreting it your own way.
Okay.
So I guess I'll start from the beginning. Yes, you start at a mom and pop place. I believe it's called Rose and something family funeral home or something like that. And yeah, you're the mortician. So they'll get introduced by Rose herself, which is the current owner who inherited the funeral home from her dad, I believe. And they've kept it in the family for a long time. And she welcomes you, and then you get all of this dialogue stuff is through emails, basically. Then you get introduced by the guy who, I think he picks up the bodies in, the hearse from, say, the hospital or wherever they're coming from. And he also, I believe it says after you prep the body that he dresses them ready for the funeral or whatever. Another thing is, in the emails, you have the main email from Rose, which talks about the body and stuff. You get sometimes the email from the guy, which I forget his name, sorry. And he just talks about random things that's going on with the company. And then a third email type you get is from your friend who I think she moved over to London and she works in a museum or something. And she also works with dead bodies somehow. Her emails are fun and interesting. And it took me a while to figure out if they were sisters, if they were friends.
If they were roommates.
Yes, possibly. But I think at the end it's just a friend or whatever. Let's see. And then the gameplay itself is basically just a point and click. It's not even a puzzle to figure out necessarily how to prep the body. It'll give you the instructions okay, you first have to, clean the body, so you get the sponge and you just wash them down. And then you have to shave them if they have hair.
Is it graphic?
No, oh god, no, not at all. It is the most basic thing. They cover the tops of the ladies. this is incredibly stylized and is like the loosest term of working on a corpse.
Okay, I gotcha.
So if you're like squeaked out by gore or something, this is not going to be a problem whatsoever. And actually, that's kind of, I don't know if I would call it a problem necessarily, but I did put this in my notes for later. So the first corpse you get, I guess, is an older gentleman. And like, there's barely any difference between the genders or ages or anything. It'll take you how to do a basic prep of a body. And again, there's like no puzzle as elements to this. It's just like you sew it up. So you just kind of follow the lines and it's super easy. You'll do a basic funeral arrangement first. And then there's like, you can do a basic body prep that's more natural. So you don't put in the formaldehyde and stuff in the body. Then you go through like a cremation process. And the very basic. There's either the regular body prep or there's cremation.
Okay.
And cremation is even more simple. It's just like you put the body in the furnace and then you put the bones in the bone grinder. I don't remember what it's called.
Bone grinder.
Well, you have to grind up the bones and you put them with the ashes and stuff in the urn.
Is that something that actually happens in real life? I had no idea.
Well, yeah, because when you put it in the fireplace thing, forgive me, I forget all the terms.
Crematorium?
Sure. It turns like the flesh and stuff to ash, but the bones are still solid.
Oh,
like the bones don't burn up. You have to grind them down.
Honestly, I have no idea. I thought like, oh, it was so hot that it burned everything to ash, I guess.
Nope. So that's probably how it generally works in real life. I'm sure there's more details that you go in if you actually get into that. So, okay, and then after you prep the body, there's two main rooms in this game. There's the back of the funeral home where you prep the bodies and cremate and stuff. And then there's, when you're finished with that, you click to go to the next room, which is like the funeral hall. Okay. Which is about the same size.
And this is all kind of just menu based. You're not like controlling a character walking around.
No, like I said, it's point and click.
Okay.
So then you go into the funeral home and, the body or the urn will be set up. And you just kind of go around. You're like paying your respects to the family and the deceased. So you go around and you talk with everyone, or you have the opportunity to talk to everyone if you wish. But it's kind of like you're not talking to them. You're clicking on the NPCs and you're just observing their conversation things.
Fair enough. Makes sense.
Yeah. And this is kind of where it's story heavy, but on the other hand, you're interpreting it on your own.
And does it really, I'm assuming it doesn't like really matter. Like you're just reading their stories. You're not like interacting dialogue choices, etc.
Not at all. It's more like you could almost imagine Charlie as a ghost because they don't reply to her. She doesn't reply to them. You're just observing.
Do you have to observe them?
Technically not, but I talk to everyone because that's just what I'm into, and I get an achievement for talking to everyone.
I mean, that's fair. I'm sure that's what most people are into. I was just curious, like if you just want to be like a workhorse and not like get into the details of everyone's lives.
I mean, I guess if you want to speed run the game and finish it in 15 minutes, sure.
Fair enough.
When you go into the funeral room, the funeral hall, whatever you want to call it, the only thing you have to do to progress the game is click on the casket or on the urn, and then Charlie does the kind of like little bow, and then you can go back to the room if you want. You don't have to talk to anyone. But that's where kind of the story, and it's, some people will talk and they'll say like, oh, I'm sad about the deceased, or, I'm sorry that they're gone, or I'm sad that they're gone, or I should have talked to them before they passed away, or stuff like that. Some of them will be like, oh man, I'm just hungry. I want to go off and do something else. This is depressing, or stuff like that. It's just like how different people react to the death of the loved one or something.
Totally. Got it.
And then there's kind of, I don't know if you'd call it sad, because like the people pass on, they're not going to notice anything. But obviously funeral stuff is, for being alive, we have a different view of it than if we're actually dead and there's nothing. But it's kind of a sad one where someone doesn't have anyone. So you go into the room, it's completely empty, you pay your respects, and you leave. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's like, it's sad in a way, but it's more like, oh, you just kind of pity them in a way, but like maybe that's a weird reaction to have too.
I'm not sure if...
Like, oh, you don't have anybody. But maybe he's the last person. Maybe he outlived everybody. Maybe that's... Anyway, that's a whole other discussion.
Maybe it's less pity and more just general compassion. I don't know if you'd want to equate the two, but...
I don't know. I mean, do you feel pity is a negative thing?
I guess, as far as it seems, most people tend to use pity in a more negative thing. Because they're always like, oh, I don't want people to pity me, or don't pity me, or...
Well, yeah, people will have shame about, like, I don't want to be pitied. Just because I'm in this situation or whatever doesn't mean... I don't know.
I guess you'd have to look at the term necessarily, because it's like a quick offshoot or whatever. The word awesome generally has the good connotation, but awesome doesn't always have to be a good thing.
Yeah, it's anything that inspires awe, which can be also scary negative things.
Yeah. So that's one half of the story. There's the other half of the story where it's, you're working for this mom and pop funeral home. They do a lot of good things for their clients. And, if you read all the emails, you'll see what more little specific allowances they give some of their clients, if you will. And then at some point they notice that they can't pay their bills because they're not getting enough services. So they end up getting purchased by a conglomerate, I guess you could say. And then they come in, and you'll get more of the story, especially from the other guy you quote unquote work with. He starts complaining about them. You see all the changes they do. And another thing is, when you're reading all these emails, hopefully you'll notice that there's a second tab to your computer window. And sometimes this tab will update depending on the day. Not all days update, but I think most of them do. And you can see the changes that the conglomerate does to the funeral home if you check the tab before and after the overtake or the buyout. And you'll see they start putting all in these special packages, and they have all these fees, and they no longer allow some of the things that the family funeral home did that people liked. And it's just, it's a usual story of a corporation coming in and screwing everything up. So take it as you will. And then it's interesting because the music is pretty, I guess you maybe could say melancholy, but it's not aggressive music. It's very calm, but it's the same music day in and day out. You kind of get used to it. It's just in the background or whatever. And then you'll notice, or at least I did notice, that you start the last day of the game and suddenly it changes and you're like, oh, something's going on because the music changed.
Yeah.
And obviously I don't want to give anything away. It's a cute game. It's an indie studio, so please find and pay for this game if you're into story games. And then the change happens and you're like, oh, that's cool. And I kind of wish we could have seen more about how she does this, but I guess in a way that could also maybe in the future become its own game, like a funeral management style type of game or something. And that's just the basics of it. I enjoyed it, but it also gives me the want to play a more, if you will, realistic mortuary game.
Yeah, the only other funeral game I know of is that horror game, and that's kind of silly.
Yeah, I don't want a horror game. I don't even remember, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want a kind of realistic game because, as I probably brought up before, this game is not gory at all. The NPCs, barely any difference between male, female, old, or young. There actually is one story case that I guess they figured the subject matter, so they let you decide if you want to actually prep the body on this particular story.
Interesting.
But you can't tell the age of the person. The bodies are the same. One of the bodies you have to prep, this in the story, in the text, it says that she's a cyclist that got hit by a car, right? So I'm like, oh, maybe this body's actually going to look a little different. No, everything's intact.
Gotcha.
But if you listen to the conversations, it sounds like her body would have been absolutely mangled.
Weird.
So
I can see why they wouldn't want to put that in a game.
Yeah, I get it, but yeah, I want to play something more realistic. But that's just me because I've always kind of been fascinated in this. I'll have to look around and see if there is such a thing.
Yeah, well,
But if you want the basic story and you don't like gore, by all means give this game a shot. Do you have any random thoughts or questions?
No, I mean, it sounds like you enjoyed it, and that's all that matters, even if it's not a game I'd probably ever play.
I just want something a little more, that's all.
That's interesting, because if I had to play a game like this, I would probably rather play one that like this than something more gory.
I mean, that's fair. But, like, if you're reading a story and this poor lady is like, oh, she got hit by a car while she was cycling. It was a mess. I don't want to...
very depressing. Like, you're just dealing with a ton of that kind of stuff.
I mean, you're working with death, so...
So, yeah, that's kind of... That is, like, for me, like, another thing. It's, like, it's interesting. I don't mind games that are, like, they have depressing or sad stories, but, like, somehow...
There's nothing happy that comes out of this.
Yeah, there's never any, like... Well, I don't know. I haven't played the game. Maybe there is, like, uplifting parts and happy parts in her own personal story to like, balance it out. But it kind of reminds me, if you don't mind the segue, I'm not going to talk about Fallout a lot, but yeah, I've been playing a lot of Fallout. And it kind of reminds me of, like, when 76 first came out, and there was like, oh, there's no NPCs. It's just you and other players. And so every time you ran into a story or a quest or whatever out in the world, you were always seeing people struggling to survive, and every single one of them failed. And after a while, it's like, oh, here's a new town, here's a new story, but I know that
everyone died.
Yeah, so it's like, it kind of is like, it's depressing, but it's also just kind of like, I kind of lose interest in, like, oh, here's their struggle, and this is how they almost did it, and this is how they inevitably died. And it's like, it gets to be too much.
I guess that's why they brought in the NPCs.
Yeah, that helps bring some levity, but, like, it's tough because, like, some of the stories are interesting and good. It's just, I think what it missed out that previous Fallout games or even the show does, it, like, you can balance it with, like, uplifting and fun and humorous and hopeful stories too. And it didn't really have that at the beginning.
Did they have any, I mean, if you happen to remember, did they have any stories where, like, the people were like, okay, we can't handle it here, we're just going to move on, and that could be a happy story? Because you don't know that they went off somewhere else and then died?
Kinda. I mean, later on they added in stuff like that. I don't know if you would consider it a retcon, but yeah, later in the update that brought NPCs back, they're like, oh yeah, this is a group of people that used to live here, now they're back. It's like, okay. Or like, oh, this is a group of people that were from somewhere else and now they live here. Or it's, the storytelling in 76 isn't the best, to be honest with you, but whatever. Some of the newer stories are interesting. Like, I just got finished playing one of the quests for the Atlantic City expansion. So it's like you go to New Jersey. And I guess it was okay, but it's not like some of the best storytelling ever in the series, but it's fine for what it was.
Would you like to talk about what you've been playing this past week?
Well, besides Fallout, the other thing I've been playing was Eiyuden Chronicle. Eiyuden Chronicle. Yeah, I think that's Eiyuden Chronicle. Oh boy, 100 Heroes. It's, the Suikoden follow-up. I've been playing a little bit more of it. I'm still not that far into it, but one of the things that I thought was kind of funny was okay, so this game has voice acting, right? Because of course games these days have voice acting. The original games on the PlayStation, the Suikoden games, didn't have voice acting. Actually,
Let me guess, you prefer the no voice acting.
I guess Suikoden 3 had voice acting, but Suikoden 3 and from then on they were in 3D. So like it was more cinematic in the sense that, like, you would zoom in and see the characters and see their faces and see their mouths moving, right? There is no mouth movement here. So all you get is the little picture and the voice acting. And I'm the type of person where I'm like, I can read way faster than this person is acting out the line. So it gets kind of tedious. So at one point I just turned off the voices and I'm like, oh, now it feels like an old JRPG. I could just read and, like, have the voice in my head or whatever. And it makes me think, like, for a game like this, I don't want to say, like, the voices are bad, because they're fine. It's just that, for me, I kind of don't need them, I guess. And it makes me think of, like, there are certain games like Monster Hunter. The old ones used to do this really good, where you would talk to somebody, or they would be talking to you, and they would just have, like, a little, like, a grunt, or a, kind of like how Zelda does it, too.
Yeah.
Like, they'll be like, oh, and you'd hear like, oh, this is the person's voice, but they're not saying the whole line. So you can read it and you can still kind of hear their voice in your head. So I kind of wish more games would do that, honestly. I like that because like I can still read at my own pace and I still get a hint of what this person's voice sounds like. Whereas when, like, if I do want to have their voices and to hear what they sound like, I'm constantly interrupting their text. Like they'll be talking like, oh, our new mission is, so the cave is over, and I'm like constantly like, because I'm reading faster than they can talk.
Yeah, that's fair.
So it's like I either do that or I sit there and let them say out the whole line in the voice acting, and it just, it drags.
Okay, here's a quick question. Do you prefer when they do it like in Zelda where they're like, oh, like the grunting noises?
Yeah.
Or do you prefer it if they have like their own little saying that hopefully doesn't go on too long, but they like repeat it often or something? Like, I don't have a concrete example of a game, but like they start a dialogue and this is what I think, or something like that.
And then they don't say the whole line.
Right.
Fire Emblem Awakening, and I think the one after that too, like they did that on the 3DS where like they'll just say like one line and then you read the rest. And I don't know, I kind of didn't like that either. Cuz then it's like, am I waiting for the whole line to be read out? Oh no, there's nothing after this. I guess
I think I would prefer just hearing grunts, especially if they repeat the line over and over again. Grunting is just more acceptable.
Yes, I think there was another game. It might have been the other Suikoden, because there's a Suikoden on the DS. I forget what it's called, like Takeris or something. I don't know. It's been so long. It's not very well regarded. And they had the thing where like, did they though? You know what? I don't want to say for sure because I don't remember exactly, but there was voice acting, and the DS already compressed the voices to high hell. So it's like for some games, especially for a portable game like that, it's like, it's okay, just don't have voice acting or do the grunts or whatever. But even in a game like this, because it's 2D and because it's like sprite based, so you're not like zoomed in on their faces, you're not seeing like facial expressions to go along with the voice acting, and because some of it is very anime, which also doesn't help, I kind of just don't need it. It's interesting because that reminds me of like Final Fantasy VII is a pretty goofy game. It has its serious story, but there's a lot of goofiness, and that's something I love about it, right? But then you look at the remake, especially the most recent one. Oh god, what is it called? I actually don't remember what the second remake is called. Well, everyone knows what it is. You get Yuffie in that game, and she and some of the other characters are just so freaking anime.
With the high-pitched voices and
the exaggerated it's not the voices that bothers me, it's the very
mascot movement.
Yeah. It's a very Japanese thing, and it's fine in like anime or in things that are kind of like a little abstract. But when you're making your characters look
realistic,
and they're moving like that and like gyrating and stuff, it just feels weird.
That's why I like calling it mascot movement. Because like you're supposed to do those exaggerated things when you're like, in a Mickey Mouse costume or something that doesn't talk. You have to exaggerate to get your emotions across. But realistic humans don't need to make that movement because we have the more minute expressions.
It kind of triggers that same feeling of like uncanny valley. Like this is this person, but they look like a person, but they're acting like an alien. It's weird, and it really is off-putting. So Eiyuden Chronicles doesn't have that, in the sense that it's a 2D game, but because it is a 2D game, the sprites are very emotive in the sense of like they'll flail around and be fun like that, and I think that's fine and I like it. But like then you combine that with like the spoken dialogue and the voiceovers, which are generally fine, but like I kind of just rather read it. It feels less weird when I read it and it's in my mind versus like hearing somebody say some of these lines.
So it's like a dual issue where one, you're reading faster than they can speak, regardless of how they're acting, and then on top of that, you have the disconnect between how the sprites are acting and how they sound.
I don't know if it's kind of. I think it's just some of it too is just like they'll sometimes you'll read a person's dialogue and like it feels fine, but then like when you hear somebody say that dialogue out loud, it doesn't feel fine. Does that make sense? Like
If I saw it, probably.
it's kind of hard to explain, but like yeah, sometimes you'll it's like, oh, this person is saying this thing, and I read it and it's totally fine. It doesn't even like register a thought in my head. But sometimes you'll hear like this person is saying this thing and they're actually saying it out loud, and you're like, wait a minute, this sounds really weird. Who talks like this?
Yeah, that's fair.
It's weird. So yeah, Eiyuden Chronicle. It's fine. I like it so far, I guess. There's also a bit of tediousness in like the dungeon design.
Is it the same thing over and over again?
The last dungeon I was in was like this long mine shaft, and oh my god, it just kind of dragged. And I don't know how to feel about that. Like, I don't remember the Suikoden games being that tedious. I think I'll have to double check this too, but I think the battle system it's similar. You make a party of 6 and you can auto battle. But I feel like in Suikoden it was faster. I'll have to do like a side by side. That'll be something really fun to do. Just like this is how long it takes to get into a random battle in Eiyuden, hit auto, watch them fight, and then get back to walking. And do the same with Suikoden 2. And I feel like there's a disconnect there, and that Suikoden 2 was just way more faster and fluid and fun to watch. But again, I'll do a comparison later.
Now, was the mine shaft boring because it was so linear, or was it just because it literally took so long with all the fighting?
It took so long because some of the paths are just, I mean, think of a mine shaft in your head, and it's just like long stretches of track. And then there's a room, and then another long section of track. You have this weird vision. I think I took a couple screenshots I'll have to show you. Your character feels like you have extreme short-sighted. Is it short-sighted? Nearsightedness? Yeah, nearsighted, right? I'm pretty sure that's what I have. Everything far away is really blurry. And I think it's because they're doing like a tilt shift thing, which looks fine in the cities, but when you're like in a more enclosed area like the mine shaft, it is really bad. And I really don't like that post-processing effect that they put on it. I'll have to show you a screenshot.
So it's not like they're trying to make a fog of war or anything?
No, it's just things in the background are blurry, but because the way things are shifted, it gets really blurry really quick. And it feels like, I feel like I'm playing Velma without glasses on.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, so there's that, and the battles they feel like they take a bit longer than Suikoden. So that dungeon was a bit of a slog.
Now, all of the dungeons is bad, or was it just because it was a mine shaft?
There was another quote-unquote dungeon that was kind of like a mountain range, and that didn't feel as bad to me. It felt shorter, and because of the way the environment was set up, it wasn't as claustrophobic, and like I can see everything. So yeah, the mine shaft was definitely the not great one. The mine shaft was the worst of the two. They also do this thing with bosses where they have like gimmicks, and a lot of our RPGs will have a gimmick, right? Like, oh, this boss is like, don't attack its shell or only counterattack or whatever, right? In this, they just straight up say there's a gimmick, and there's an option when you select attack to be like gimmick. So for example, in one of the bosses, there's like, oh, there's rocks here, and the gimmick is you hide behind these rocks when the boss is doing an attack on this side.
Okay.
And in another one, the gimmick is like, oh, there's a claw machine, and like the gimmick option is you hit the switch to like counter or whatever. And you know, I don't want to be like just make a normal non-gimmicky battle system, but something in my mind is just like, did you really have to call it gimmick? Because it does feel like a gimmick, and it is a gimmick. They're calling it a gimmick. But
they don't have to say it.
It just feels weird to think like, now what's going to be the gimmick this time? It just kind of puts you in the mindset of like, is this going to be a thing that's constantly happening? Are we ever just going to have some... I don't want to run into battles where like there's just going to be a million different gimmicks to juggle, when what I really want to be doing is strategizing my party, their equipment, their loadout, their skills, etc. But I don't know. I guess we'll see. I mean, I'm going to keep playing it, obviously. But it makes me think back to like Unicorn Overlord that I've been playing before. There are some gimmicks in that game, but they're really not intrusive, and it's more like, oh, this map has this that you might have to watch out for, like, oh, there's fire this time, or like catapults, or whatever that may be, but they feel like they make sense. And ultimately it's still about like the parties you put together and like your strategies versus like having to deal with, oh, now there's a claw machine. So I don't know, it's a really minor little nitpick thing, but it's not that big of a deal. I just remember back in the Suikoden days, like you just literally, oh, here's a boss and you're gonna fight it. It has some strong attacks and you'll have to strategize around it, but it's not going to be like, now he's bringing out the robot arm and you have to like do a little dance before you can damage him or something. I don't know, we'll see. It's fine. I really like the music though, at least, even if
Still orchestrated?
no, is it? No, I think it's just like synthesized music, but it's still good. It's really good.
Okay, so I'm gonna go into game news.
I guess we got time for like one.
You don't have one of your own, or?
No.
Okay, that's fine. This is gonna be game news because I thought it was so egregious, but it's also game news of a game type that we just do not play, like neither of us. So I don't know if that's gonna make things kind of weird, but
we're gonna be biased going into it.
Probably. Okay,
but if you want to talk about it, by all means.
And I'm curious, we didn't talk about this before recording this podcast because I want to see David's reaction, just genuinely. Okay, so this is about a Rudy Tooty Loot and Shooty, or whatever you want to call it. I like to call them Looty Shooties. Okay, you know of the game Tarkov, right?
Yeah, I know of it.
Okay, and you know it's like a looter shooter type of thing.
Is it a looter shooter? I thought it was more like a survival game.
I mean, there's some aspects, I think, but there's something about, like, I guess the game ends and then you get set up or to respawn into a new game or something. But you, like, sometimes take stuff with you, I think.
Okay.
It's weird. Anyways. So, apparently, they're getting a new addition to the game. So, there's the base game. I don't know if you pay for it once or if it's like a free to play or whatever.
Okay. This is definitely something that would have been good to know ahead of time.
I'm sorry. I took this from one article from Mike Stubbs for Forbes magazine. So
okay.
They had previously released a different edition or DLC, whatever you want to call it, called Edge of Darkness Edition, that said in its list of...
Sounds edgy.
Yeah. In its list of promises or whatever, that all future DLC would be included for free if you bought that edition.
Sure.
Okay. So there's this new edition that the devs state that the new edition doesn't count as DLC because it's quote unquote DLC means additional downloadable content. PvE is a feature in a game mode. Now, if you're downloading it, wouldn't that still just count as DLC?
Oh, so let me get this straight. So it's kind of like, this is a game that's PvP focused. There is no PvE. Mm-hmm. Kind of like Overwatch, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So they've had like a game pass or whatever where you buy, and whenever they add stuff to the PvP mode, you just get it for free. And now they're like, oh, now we're making a PvE mode, and it's going to be a separate thing, like an expansion or something. Okay, that makes sense.
But still, if your DLC means downloadable content, even a new edition or feature of PvE
is still downloadable content. Yeah,
I would classify it as that, yes, because you're downloading it. But
I mean, yeah, even expansions, like, those are still downloadable content if you want to be pedantic about it. Yeah.
So they're not including this with this new edition. Now, here's the thing. Would you like to guess how much this edition costs?
Well, I don't know what the base game costs or if it's free to play, but okay, if it's a PvE expansion, is it like a story mode with like 10 hours, 20 hours, a big open world with 50, 60, 80 hour gameplay? I don't know. So I don't know, 30, 40 bucks?
No. Higher.
60?
Higher.
70?
Higher.
Okay, it's already too much. It shouldn't cost more than a regular game.
It's $250.
What the hell? $250 for a PvE expansion?
Yeah.
What is in this?
I don't know. It's just the devs also say Just because you all want it to become a DLC, it wouldn't mean it is one, which we've kind of already gone over. It's a feature game mode for those for the new edition of the game. I don't know. So some
That doesn't
people,
make sense. Like you could just release it as a new game at that point, and still you would not be charging $200.
no sane person would be charging $200, but this is 250. So it's even like more, I don't know. And then some people are complaining this counts as a pay to win because apparently more space to store loot on the map, extra abilities at wipe start. AI NPCs won't shoot if the level with fence is high enough, which is 6 plus. So if you have a level of 6 or higher with fence, which I guess is like trading or whatever, the AI won't attack you.
We're definitely getting into situations or something that we have no idea what we're talking about because we don't know anything about this game.
I know, I know. But it was just like, just the idea that this game is selling a new edition, not calling it DLC, even though everyone is going to be downloading it, because that's just how you access game these days,
Yeah,
for 250 fucking dollars.
that's so weird. I really don't feel comfortable talking about stuff I don't know about.
Okay, okay.
But like if it's a PvE mode, like okay, going back to Overwatch. Overwatch was PvP, and they're like, we're gonna release Overwatch 2, and it's gonna have PvE, and they never did, obviously, right? But at least that was like, this is a $60 new game that has the PvE mode in it. That's what it should be. Like, okay, Tarkov is its own PvP game. We want to make a PvE thing, so let's either make an expansion or a new game and sell it for like a normal game price. Nobody's gonna an expansion pack for $200 plus. That sounds ridiculous. Like,
Yeah, not only could you make the PvE bit its own game, which would make more sense, but then you're paying all this money and it's also given all these extra one-ups for the PvP players. Like they're doing two packages as one and then charging like a insane premium for it. Just make the PvE game mode its own game
yeah,
and then have like a little, I don't know, premium access DLC for all the PvP stuff where the AI doesn't shoot you for some reason or whatever.
I'm guessing like maybe the PvE mode has like, oh, you're gonna ally with these NPCs, and
But then, like, if that was true, if it was staved to the PvE game, then I don't think like most people would care because that doesn't influence how PvP play would be.
I
But
guess.
if you're specifically not being targeted in PvP while everyone else is, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, that gives you advantages.
Yeah.
I mean, it's this sounds dumb. I don't know enough about it, so I feel weird even commenting on it. But like, it's definitely not the type of game I even care about. Like, oh, a
I
PvP
know,
game
but
gone PvE or whatever. Like,
hey, here's this online PvP game, and they got this new edition, and it costs $250.
that is the weirdest thing to me. Like, that doesn't make sense for any game. Like, that's like even worse than Star Citizen stuff. Like,
Yeah, because even was it Fallout 76 that had like the Pip Boy or the bag or whatever, and even that didn't come close to that price tag.
the physical item, you mean?
Yeah, I think there one of I could have sworn something would fall out, and they were like, "Oh, here's this bag that you can buy for this special collector's edition or something."
Yeah, back when the game first released. I don't remember the details of that. I'd never get that stuff. I don't need junk in my house. I already got too much junk. I'm too old. I'm almost 40.
Too old for this shit.
Like the very first time I got like game loot like that was an Ocarina of Time t-shirt. That was what? When did that game release? 99,
97 or 98, something like. I think it was 97.
Back in the 90s. Like imagine like 25 years later, like even just one or two things a year. It would be too much. That's just not for me. I don't want junk. I don't want amiibos. I don't want Funko.
I wouldn't mind a Mew Amiibo, but that's specific.
Yeah, I mean, okay, fine, you like Mew stuff, but like, ugh, I'm not gonna get into that discussion, but I really don't like amiibos. I don't like physical DLC. In order to get this cool outfit, you need to buy this trinket. If it sells out, well, sorry, I guess you'll just have to buy it on eBay. Sorry, no, I don't like that.
What about when you bought which Zelda game was it? And we got the gold controller with it.
Oh yeah, that was a pre-order bonus for, I think it was
Twilight Princess?
no, Skyward Sword.
Oh, gotcha.
This is its own issue too, but That was because that Wii remote had like was it the Wii Motion Plus or something? It was like built into it.
Oh, was that it? Because I know
Yeah,
like
because
it
the
had.
old Wiimotes didn't have that. So like the new Wiimotes had like new tracking capability or something. I don't remember the
Which was still
specific.
not great, right?
I mean, it was better, but like this is again another conversation. I don't like that kind of shit anyways. Like I don't. I'd rather just play it with the controller and buttons.
Fair.
But because I wanted to play the new Zelda game and I didn't have a Wii Motion Plus controller,
Might as
it
well
made
get it.
sense to just get that one anyways.
Yeah.
And it also made sense in the sense that we only had one controller anyway. So like getting the extra one means, oh, now we have two. So when we play other games,
Party games.
yeah, then I don't need to buy another controller. I just use the one that the Zelda thing gave me.
That's fair.
So like that was okay. Like in the perfect world, yeah, I would much rather have not having to got like a special controller, but ultimately we needed another controller anyways, and it was like the new updated version of the controller, so it's like whatever. It was okay. That still doesn't compare to like a $15 piece of plastic that, if you touch it, you get a new hat in your game. I don't know. I don't like that.
That's fair.
Also because there's so many of them. People have spent hundreds of dollars on those things.
Maybe a couple of thousand, depending.
It's like, it's just too much, man. That's just like, we're going to find a way to make players spend more money on our stuff. Like, if every game had like a DLC for like $12, that was like, this gives you a new costume or something, that's bad enough. But the fact that it's like a physical thing that you have to like make room for or find, because sometimes they sell out. Collectors love that kind of stuff, and fine, whatever. That's just not for me. And I will say, I guess one of the interesting things about it is like it's a cross-game DLC. So like, oh, you bought this Zelda amiibo, it'll do something in this game. It'll do something in this game. It'll do a different thing in this game. So it's like, okay, fine, that's kind of interesting in a way. But like, I still rather just like don't lock content out of your games. It's just scummy, in my opinion. I hate that kind of thing. Okay, this is an example of in Monster Hunter Rise, right? You can buy an amiibo, and if you touch the little amiibo to your Switch, it gives you some cosmetic armor. The type of armor that it's just, this changes your look, it doesn't change your stats. That is locked to the amiibo. So if you're playing on PC or PS3 or any of the other consoles, you just don't have access to that. Which, whatever, it's Nintendo's right or Capcom's right to do that. But it's still, in my opinion, scummy, because in previous Monster Hunter games, it was like, oh, there's a new armor, it's cosmetic, but in order to get it, let's say it's Mega Man themed. In order to get this Mega Man themed armor that is just cosmetic, you have to do this quest where you fight the little red dog, and it's themed around, Mega Man Rush, right? So you fight this little red dog, and you get like Mega Man music in the battle, and it's just a quest. It's just something added to the game.
But it's available to everyone.
Yeah, it's just when you get cosmetic stuff like that being sold, it just means one less thing to do in the game. Because like another good example of this kind of thing is Breath of the Wild. Like the wolf, you can use the wolf to get like a wolf helper in Breath of the Wild, right? We never did that, but if you use that amiibo, then you get the wolf. But that is something that they programmed into the game, and instead of being like, oh, there's this hidden quest, you find this wolf and you like have to earn its trust, and then you can use it in game. No,
They're just like,
it's just
pay us
pay
money.
$12, we'll give you this plastic thing, and you get the wolf. And that, in my opinion, is the worst kind of crap in modern games. I really, really, really don't like it.
That's fair.
But like even just a simple like armor, because okay, that wolf thing is very gameplay changing to have
A helper.
a helper, right? So much so that they made it like a feature of the sequel. Well, I think I haven't actually played that one yet, but that's a whole other story. But even just armor, right? Because like there's amiibos for like, oh, if you touch this, you get the Twilight Princess outfit. But instead of just like finding an old chest in some dungeon with it, no, you have to pay money and get it that way. So it's like, I don't like that. I really don't like that.
Especially since we enjoy playing it on PC.
Yeah, and thinking back to like Monster Hunter Rise, like there was this update that added these plushies, and like every weapon got like a different plush. Like say, oh, I don't remember specifically because I didn't buy them, but like say like, oh, you want this hammer? It's a plushie in the shape of like I don't know, Kezu or a monster or whatever, right? And it's really cute, and you'd think, oh, there could be a quest of like, oh, I'm a toy maker or whatever, and I need the materials from this monster to make this cool hammer. But that's not in the game. It's literally just go to the Steam store, give us $10, and then you get it. And that is, ugh, I hate that kind of thing. Which is sad in a series like Monster Hunter that has so many joke weapons in it already. Like, you can fight with a big thing of corn. You can fight with, like, a frozen fish. You can fight with dango. And these are just things that are in the game. And it's fun to unlock them. And, like, they're just quests in the game to get them. But for, like, the new plushie thing that they added, nope, there's no quest. Even if you buy it, there's no quest. It's just, there you go, you have it. Because money is more important. So, yeah, I don't like that kind of thing. It's a pet peeve. Maybe it's a discussion for another time. The whole...
Yeah, we could...
What kind of microtransactions are acceptable? Because a lot of people don't like the pay-to-win thing, like you were saying, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, when it's gameplay changing, like NPCs are friendly to you now, that's different. But then there's also like PvE kind of like boost, like now you get 10% more XP.
Yeah,
or buy
I think
healing items.
I think in the future we should definitely have this discussion because I know we have slight disagreements of how we feel about paying for various things.
Yeah.
So we can definitely make a whole episode for that in the future.
Yeah, that's fair. This is already getting long and I'm just getting worked up over it.
So no gaming news on your end then?
I don't know. There hasn't been anything too interesting that I've seen. I think I saw something about Todd Howard saying that, yeah, we're looking into ways to making our games faster. Especially after the Fallout show. Like, they need to be making games faster. We're going to have to wait for 5 years for Elder Scrolls. Yeah. We're going to have to wait 5 years or more for the next Elder Scrolls. And then they'll start working on the next Fallout. That's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, well, they also need a team, I would think, to work on a whole new engine, assuming they're not working on it.
Don't get me started on that, because I don't think that is more overblown than people make it out to be. But...
I don't know. I don't know how game engines work.
And that's why it's very important to know what you're talking about before you put it out there on the internet.
Fine.
Okay.
I think that'll end it for this week. From Stardew Valley, this is Mine's Cloth version.